everyone. Welcome. Um, so I'm just reading through these notes because I'm better reading than going off the cuff. Welcome to the series, The Past is Present, New Montagnard Artists. My name is Harina Detroit, and I'm today's host. Our hour-long presentation is an author's talk entitled Writing Our Legacies, Montagnard Authors and Storytellers Over Generations, in which Montagnard American writers come together to discuss crafting and publishing the stories of survival they've inherited. This project is made possible by funding provided by Creative Greensboro, the Office of Arts and Culture of the City of Greensboro, through a Catalyzing Creativity Grant. Shout out to Montagnard Dega Association and its youth branch, Montagnard American Organization, for applying to the grant. Please check out the chat section for links to our Facebook page and links to my upcoming workshops and our guests' books too. This evening's program structure will consist of a conversation with our guests. At 6:15, we'll break for questions. If you'd like to use the chat feature to ask questions or make comments, please do. We will invite live questions on camera at that time too. And Andrew has put some links into the chat the audience can check out. And now to introduce today's program and guests. Actually, I'm just going to introduce the guests at this point. So Y-Danair Niehrah was born and raised in Charleston, South Carolina, and has studied creative writing for over 15 years. He has a passion for too many hobbies outside of writing, including martial arts, video games, and music. Right. You can see the guitars behind Y-Dan if you want proof. Y-Luin, who's sitting next to Y-Dan, was born in Buonya to Ithi Aban. He grew up in the midst of the Vietnam War and studied medicine before fleeing Saigon in 1975. Since then, he has settled in Charleston, South Carolina, fell in love with technology and electronics, and raised 4 kids with his amazing wife, Michela. Another guest is Anna Ksor Buonya. Anna, can you give a wave? There she is. Anna is Yeon's eldest child out of 5. She was born in the jungles of Thailand, grew up in North Carolina, and now lives in Washington, D.C., or the Washington, D.C. area. She is a mother, business immigration attorney, jewelry designer, and aspires to be a published writer like her mother. She is currently working on a Montagnard children's book to be completed by the end of this year. Although Yeon is unable to attend this event, Yeon is Anna's mom, Anna is present to discuss escaping Vietnam, Yeon's story, and sharing her mother's memoir writing techniques, which I'm super excited about. And as far as me, I'm going to give a quick bio about myself. I'm Harina Detroit, and I'm a Montagnard American writer living in Brooklyn, New York. I was recently appointed a contributing editor to Diacritics, with a focus on amplifying Indigenous, Montagnard, and ethnic minority voices. I'm the recipient of the Café Royale Cultural Foundation 2020 Grant in Literature and the 2019 Aspen Word Emerging Writer Fellowship. My essay, The Vengeance of Elephants, won the 2017 Kurt Johnson Prize in Creative Nonfiction. I've been teaching creative writing in New York City, and I am leading the Apocalypse Never I'm leading the writing workshop, Apocalypse Never, Writing Our Origin Stories and Imaginative Futures, in addition to other workshops. You can see links to the other workshops, and there's one coming up this May. And also, Anna is one of the participants in Apocalypse Never, and there's a few other participants in the audience, and I'm so happy that all of you are here. In fact, thank you everyone for joining us. This is an amazing turnout. I'm so excited that you are all here to celebrate Montagnard American writing and stories. So Y-Dan, Luin, and Anna, all 3 of us did a pre-interview yesterday, so we know how quickly time flies. I'm going to ask that you try to limit your answers to 2 minutes each, as best as you can. So, Idan, your book, Homeland, a Vietnam War story of the Montagnards, is historical fiction you wrote and published as a teenager. It's based on stories your father told you about your grandfather and great uncle. When did you realize that you were interested in your father's stories about the Montagnard War experience? Why was that important to you?
So first off, hey everyone, thank you for coming. The first time I really got into writing, must have been definitely when I joined the School of the Arts in middle school, and all of my influences came from video games, movies, TV shows, all of that. So I wrote mostly genre fiction, mostly about ninjas and fighting and everything like that. And I didn't really start getting into my dad's stories or the Montagnard people until I picked up Tim O'Brien's book, The Things They Carry, around ninth grade or so, or maybe a little later, maybe 10th grade. And the first mention I saw of Montagnards depicted them as almost savage-like, to a almost maybe derogatory degree. So my first thought was that there needs to be a better perspective on how we're depicted, not only in literature, but in history, because as you know, history is written by the winners. So, and with the Montagnard people, they were just trying to survive. So my biggest thing starting to write and talk to my dad about his stories growing up during the war was to get the essence of survival, to get the essence of basically being caught in the middle of a conflict that our people never wanted to be a part of in the first place. So that's how I started writing about those stories.
Great. I read Tim O'Brien too, and we spoke yesterday, and you talked about a very specific instance where there's just like one mention of a Montagnard, and yeah, it's just in passing, and it's just hard to believe that the mention is so small, considering our history is such a large part of that experience. All right. So this question is for Y-Luin. I think you've done a great thing telling your stories to Idan and inspiring him to write and know Montagnard history. What has been the most surprising thing for you about this project in making Idan's book, Homeland? And also, I'm curious, when you started to tell your children your stories, did you ever imagine that one day one of them would make a book out of them?
Hello, everybody. And I think when he started school and when he started to write, he always write about, like he mentioned earlier, about the monster fighting ninja, all the stuff. And then his mother and I always thought, why don't you write the real serious stuff? He said, real stuff. He said, what stuff? Not novel. He said, I don't want to write novel. But I told him that he got imagination mind about writing, about like. So I said, why don't you? I said, I got a lot of story. If you want to fictionize about my story, I can tell from everything from my childhood to during the war and what's going on back then. And then, at the meantime, I try to teach my children that, try to teach them to lead their lives and not take it for granted in this free country. Mm-hmm. Try to remind them how it was, where it came from. So when he wrote that story, so one day he started asking, what do you do from this period of time, from this age to that age? What do you do? What happened to you? So slowly we start to communicate about. So each time he asked me, sometime I was at work, I see his text, he asked, he said, Amma, what happened from this year to that year? Amma, when the first time you played the gun? Amma, when the first time you sometime the hunting for from rabbit and crossbow, stuff like that. And then slowly we can, so tell a story, and he wrote down, and then I told him all I can do is just I told him write like a rough draft, and he write it, and then see him almost every day. He asked me those questions, so I started to think he really serious about writing. So when he was in high school, that he also used that to write that book for his thesis in high school.
Mm-hmm.
But I, like you said, asked me earlier if I never thought he could be this writer, but the way, I guess the children, you look at your children, the way they're never serious when he was younger, but I'm glad that he stick to his hobby, but he's he stick to hobby, and then he graduated from it, and then when he finished his 4-year degree, and then instead of go to work and say go straight to master, so he finished his master, and I'm glad he didn't stop, because I know if he stopped it, he probably don't want to go back. It's a lot. I've seen a lot of people like that, so that's part of me surprised that he stick to it.
So just so I know, so this is Idan's book. Idan, how old were you when you finished this?
I started writing when I was 16, and pretty much had it finished before I turned 7. Yeah, I finished it before I turned 17. So it was published around when I was 16. So obviously a lot I would do different, but I definitely don't take it for granted, because I definitely had a lot of help from both my family and my peers and my professor at the time as well.
Great. Anna, let's see. Your mother's book, Escaping Vietnam, Yon's Story, is an incredible memoir chronicling her experience as a young Montagnard woman who fled through the jungle to Thailand as a refugee. And the story also talks about her helping the rebel cause. Could you tell us a little bit about your mother's process in writing her book?
Sure. So I actually was no longer a book in 2010, and she published it in 2013. So this was about a 3-year process. She said in the very beginning, she kind of kept the book a secret, even from my dad. And she did a lot of her writing around 11 o'clock at night when everyone was asleep. It was something that, she was almost scared to reveal to anyone else, because she didn't know if it would actually happen. But a lot of things that she did that I thought was really interesting was if she had a thought come to mind, she would write it on a sheet of paper and then just kind of put it in a box or put it, somewhere untouched, and just kind of wait for thoughts to come. So, whether that was certain scents, certain people that she remembered during that event, or dates and places and things like that. So it wasn't this linear process, but almost, sections here and sections there. And then she put it together at the end.
It's amazing. And of course, so this is Yon's book. It's amazing. I suggest everyone get it if you're interested in Montagnard history, especially what happened in the war. It's really a phenomenal chronicle. And I'm so glad your mom did write it, Anna. I feel blessed that we have this in the world. So, Idan, you and I have talked a bit about your writing process. You've described yourself somewhat in a joke, but somewhat seriously, as your father's ghostwriter. How do you know when to use details from real life and when you're going to put on your historical fiction writer hat and creatively conjure details, characters, or a setting? Do you have?
Yeah, so I think the most important thing writing historical fiction is getting, of course, history correct, whether that is history as it applies to geographical setting, as it applies to events that happen around the time period, And of course, I want to be, I wrote Homeland being a lot more fictionalized as, a kid then. And what I want to do now with this historical fiction is be a little more truthful and with my dad's story. But of course, there are going to be scenes that, maybe he can't even remember, being 45 plus years ago. And that was just when he was, in leaving Vietnam at the time. So even when he was younger, there are some things that I might need to maybe dramatize more, fictionalize. For instance, he always tells me stories of the Tet Offensive, which was in '68 when his village was attacked, and him sitting in a bunker for 4 days and 4 nights. That's something that can be hard to write because you're sitting in one scene for the entire time. But there's a lot to kind of extrapolate on in that regard. But again, I want to get historical details right. I want, to describe the sound of artillery shells hitting the bunker correctly. I want to describe the fear, the panic correctly. But at the same time, you need, story elements like character dynamics. You need the plot to be kind of driven a little bit. So there are times where I need to make sure that while, yes, it is historical fiction, I need all of these elements to come together as, for it to be truthful. I also need to make sure the reader is also entertained in a way, not in obviously like a fun way, but just that they're moved by what's happening. And of course, I don't want it to sound textbook-like. I don't want it to read like a Wikipedia article. So it's a delicate blend of making sure that there are facts there for the historical context and also making sure that the character is moving, his arc is driven, and that, he learns from that experience or she learns from that experience moving forward.
Yeah, I think you bring up something that aspiring and emerging writers have to begin to understand is that there's the inspiration, there's the desire to tell a story, and in your case, the desire to tell a historical story, and then there's also the dictates of what a reader needs and what a reader wants and how to engage their attention, how to keep their attention. We all know in this day of age that there are a million things vying for the attention of everyone when we have all the social media and video games and TV series and everything. It's something that we're talking a lot about in the Apocalypse Never workshop. This idea of constantly having to think about the reader. Like, yes, you may want to do something, but you need to think about how that will affect the reader and what will push them to continue turning those pages. I'm going to ask you another craft question, Idan. What are your tips for writing dialogue? I am impressed with your dialogue in Homeland, and I'm curious, how did you do that?
So it was funny because in that senior class, 12th grade of high school, it was a great program. I think it's the best in the state, or one of the best at least. They had a mentor program where accomplished author or someone just really high-level writer will come in and kind of help your craft, help your writing, whether it's poetry, short stories, etc. I was the only novel at the time, I believe. And I had, his name was John Thompson, and he was helping me and recommended the book specifically for dialogue for soldiers, because I was writing a lot about soldiers, called Matterhorn by Karl Marlantes, which was really good in letting me get raw, really, visceral dialogue of soldiers. And so that's how I used it in Homeland. But when I got to college, one of the, and if we talk prompts later, one of the prompts my instructor, Dr. Farrell, gave me was just literally go to a coffee shop, go to a park bench, and just analyze how people are talking, And one of my other professors, Brett Lott, said people talk in fits and bursts. Something crosses their mind, a squirrel runs by, a bird comes by, they change topics like quickly. So dialogue has to flow in a natural way. But again, it's a delicate balance of making sure that it moves the scene and isn't obviously just random. But people don't talk in long-winded, unless you're giving a speech, extremely long-winded speeches or exposition. So it's all about just moving the character and their dynamics along.
Great, that's super helpful. Luin, many of us in the audience, me included, have parents who have experienced war. Some of our parents want to put it behind them and not think about it. Do you have advice for people your generation who want to tell their stories? And related to that question, do you have advice for people's Idan's age who want to write the experience of their elders or of our elders?
I think my generation or generation before me, we should tell where the stories, history is good or bad to our younger generation so that they understand. Because if you don't tell them, if they can get information, the rightful information from you, they will get from somewhere. So I'd rather get from you, when you were there. Like my story, I try to tell them I was there, what happened, what's going on. Because I don't make up story instead of listen to secondhand somebody made up story. So I think we should tell our younger generation whether I know a lot of younger generation that they don't speak the language, but at least they know the cultural background. And then like sometimes we have younger generation, they know how to write, they can write. At least you can tell them a story, tell it correctly. I think we need that more. And then for younger generation, like I said, we need to tell the people. Like I remember when I grew up, only first time I came to the United States, I looking for something about Montagnard, about Degas, whatever. And I went into one of the magazine, National Geography. I'm pretty sure you've seen that. It's a man holding fish in his mouth.
Yes, I have it.
That's the way to portray our people, But I say I never been like that, I never been in a ICT boy just like everybody else. I grew up in the city. I never been in jungle. I've been in jungle, but I never lived like, But I say I don't experience that, eat raw fish or carry fish in my mouth. I said I've been fishing. We got all kind of tools, and then we use elephant to stir up the water. I told that and then write that story about it. How we do it in my tribe. I'm not sure the other tribe, but in my tribe in summertime we have that very whole village go to the river, and then we use elephant to stir up the water, and then when the fish get tired, and the people pick up the fish from it. And that's kind of story that's something our culture they need to know. I think
Niehrah, right?
We call it Niehrah. I think Liana knows what that means. Niehrah, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the opening chapter of your book, Idan. You talk about Niehrah, and it's an amazing, evocative scene that I was like, is this real? Did this really happen? That's great. Let's see, Anna. What has inspired you about your mother's past? Or what has inspired you about the fact that she is one of the first Montagnard writers? And related to that question, is there anything that you have learned from witnessing your mother's publishing process that informs how you might approach writing and publishing yourself?
So, what's really inspiring about my mother's book, other than just the life that she had before she came to the US, is really this idea that if you want something bad enough, in your heart and in your mind, it can happen. Whether it's meeting the right people who give you the courage to write it and encourage you and give you the means to write it, or just being able to connect to other people in your life. So that's one thing I always think, like, yes, I'm an aspiring writer, and if my mom could do it and she's not fluent in English, she doesn't have any connection to authors, and she was able to publish a book, like, what is stopping me? And for any other aspiring writers, what is stopping you from writing your story? And as to anything I learned, I think the most important thing I learned was actually more of a cautionary tale. So my mother was actually supposed to be part of this interview today, but she backed out. She didn't want any more backlash from the Montagnard community. And I think that's something to keep in mind, is that even though you're excited about being a published author, you may be surprised that not everyone is going to support you and not everyone's going to be happy for you. Another thing that I would advise is, if you are going to write a memoir, or if you're going to write a memoir for one of your family members, which I encourage you guys to do, because of course they have amazing stories. But if you're going to do that, in addition to getting those people to sign consent and release forms, I also highly recommend talking to people beforehand and letting them know if you're possibly writing something sensitive, whether it's about them or whether it's about people they know, because that's kind of where the backlash came from. And the thing is, at the end of the day, you have to decide, is this event or is this topic, is it important enough to put it in the book, but possibly lose a friend or family member after the book is published? And I think anytime you're doing memoirs or anytime you're writing about actual lives, something that may not seem sensitive to you could be sensitive to them. And that's something to definitely consider. So that's one reason why I'm staying away from real people.
Right. You talked about, you probably don't want to do a memoir. You're more interested in doing historical fiction or something along those lines.
Yeah, but that was definitely one lesson I learned. I mean, people can take things the wrong way, and it can lead to a lot of people being upset and ending friendships and family ties that survived the war but are lost over a book. So
yeah, I'm so sorry that your mom experienced that. I understand how sensitive people can be. I think the Montagnard American community is a small, tight-knit community. We talked about this yesterday. And for that reason, it's like sometimes the like magnifying glass can come down, and people may feel too exposed. And there's also privacy issues with our connections to Vietnam, and we worry about our family over there. So it makes writing as a Montagnard American very fraught for a lot of reasons. Um, you know, in spite of all of that, I still encourage people to write, because, the other option is silence and censorship. And that's not something I think we want as a community either. I mean, it's hard to balance those competing needs. But yeah, I salute your mom in so many ways for doing that, and especially as a Montagnard American woman. Reading her book was the first time I got to actually see how a Montagnard American woman experienced the war, because pretty much the stories are male dominated. And it was so amazing to see her experience. Okay, so let's see. This next question is for Idan. How do you remain historically accurate? And what was your research or craft process like?
Well, first, I would usually ask my dad about, his events in his life, and then craft the world building aspect around that. So, for instance, I wrote, obviously in Homeland, I wrote a chapter dedicated to his escape from Saigon. And then when I was in undergrad, I wrote the same story, but a lot more historically accurate, from street vendors the bikes that he rode, his him going through taking his pre-med exam and everything. And a lot of that was a lot of research. I even looked up photographs of the streets, any landmarks at that time, like the turtle statue in the middle of the city.
Oh yeah.
Things like that. So it either started as his story, then I created a backdrop. A lot of research. I try not to. Wikipedia is not that bad, so there are some things I would try to get at least some information on in terms of the war itself, whether it was like soldier movements, where they would be at in accordance to the date that he finished school, so I could kind of play with some tension. Maybe he would see a fighter jet go past his classroom window or something like that, just to have some backdrop. But really, it was just a lot of research. Like I mentioned in one of our earlier, when we communicated the first time, my dad and I spent maybe 1.5, 2 hours just sitting on Google Maps and Google going over old maps, the new maps, looking for his village in accordance to the city of Buonya, looking for rivers that he used to play in when he was a kid. A lot of them have dried up since to this day, but yeah, again, even to the geographical aspects of things, it's like you need the very minute, specific details in order to make it true. Because, for instance, if someone else was there and they read my story or perhaps a book in the future, they'll be like, that's not true, And at the same time, it's also how my dad remembers it, because there are a lot of things lost in history, a lot of things that you can't really figure out. So it's almost like a creative nonfiction aspect of just what do you remember, how do you remember it, and then writing the context based on that as well.
That's great. I love this idea of how history or just looking at maps or different things on the internet become a trigger to help your father and you kind of continue to craft this, to craft these stories that are historically accurate and geographically accurate and accurate in all these other ways. Let's see. So Anna, you are in the Apocalypse Never writing workshop, where I have given writing prompts like describe the hands of an elder, or write or create a fictional character based off of the ethnographic work by Gerald Hickey. Can you describe the prompt that has been the most generative or helpful in terms of inspiring you to write, and then also which one was the least generative, and you can be honest.
Well, to be honest, I actually liked all the writing prompts. Each one was a little bit different in its own way, whether, as you said, describing an elder's hand, which was more writing from a first-person narrative point of view. Another one was doing a poetry piece. Another one was trying to create fictional characters. So they all were different in their own ways. I would say the most challenging ones for me would be the ones where I was trying to put dialogue into a piece, just because I'm not good with that. And I'm still learning how to craft fictional characters. But it's great. It doesn't mean that I didn't enjoy them. It just means that it helped challenge me as a writer. And I think my favorite was probably the I Am What I Am poem, only because it had been years since I've written any poetry, and I actually love writing poetry. So it kind of opened my writer's block for me. And the other one I really liked was the one about my mother's hands, only because it kind of forced me to write about some painful, traumatic childhood memories. But in a way, after it was released, it was like this huge weight was off my shoulders. So again, just each writing prompt had its own value. And to all the aspiring writers and listeners, if there's a writing class near you, or if you're a Montagnard and there's another Montagnard writing class, or workshop, I highly recommend it. It's great for if you have a writer's block, but it's also great in challenging yourself as a writer. So if you've ever thought about doing it, definitely go ahead and take that step. I'm sure you'll love it and you're going to learn a lot from it.
Awesome. I'm just going to plug myself. Yes, I am offering another writing workshop in May, and it's called Multiverses Writing Immigrant Origin Stories. The link is in the chat because I do not pass up an opportunity to plug more work, more opportunities. So this is a question for everyone, Luin, Idan, and Anna. What, in your opinion, who needs Montagnard or Montagnard American stories? And what kinds of stories are we missing in the Montagnard American
I
literary?
think we all need, especially for our younger generation. And let's say you go to work, go to school, they ask you, what is your ethnicity? What is your, you have to tell the truth. Like I mentioned yesterday about me when I started English ESL, you know, people don't really know who you are. And if you tell you're Vietnamese, you tell Cambodian, and your name totally different. And you know, might be offended them because, you know, you make the thing you're not truthful when you don't tell who you are, but you have to tell exactly who you are. Don't be ashamed because because you're a Montagnard. And again, I think all the generation, I think they should tell the story, you know, before the war, during the war, and how old we are. Some people been lived through first and second Indochina war, from French colonization to the American. Some people even didn't see the Vietnamese in Central Island until they getting older, stuff like that. I think, and also the people non-Montagnard need to know about Montagnard, because sometimes you met new veteran, you say I'm Montagnard, and then if they happen to be work for Lao or Nung people, they think you want to know Lao people. They're a little bit different. So you need to tell exactly who you are, and then I think you need to tell your history, your background. So I would say that the younger generation and then Montagnard people, and also there's other community and other people need to know about Montagnard.
Yeah, and I think to add on to that too, I would say, in a way, writing stories of the Degas Montagnard people is part of preserving our culture and part of preserving, who we are, our identity. Again, we're depicted in a lot of different ways by a lot of people who aren't Montagnard, whether it's Vietnamese people, Americans, French, whoever wrote about our people aren't us a lot of the times. So we need our voice to be amplified. We need our voice to be ours. And I think that that goes back to your question of how can we get elders to tell their stories to the younger generation, and how can the younger generation kind of put that out there without misconstruing any information. And I think one of the more important things too about telling Montagnard stories is making sure that we tell the intimate stories rather than just stories about war or fighting, or how we helped the special forces, how we fought alongside the Americans. We already know that. There's a few documentaries, we have ethnographies out there. We need the intimate stories of family. We need culture. Like I mentioned, my dad mentioned about elephants and how we, work with them, and that kind of gets lost because to a lot of history, the Montagnards, or to a lot of Americans, the Yards are just a backdrop that helped during the war, or we were just allies in a way. And then once the war ended, we weren't anything anymore. So I think that, people deserve to know the history about everything, and not just in the context of war, but in the context of, the land and the people that were indigenous to it.
Do you have anything to add, Anna?
Yeah, so I agree with what they have both said. Just to add to that, I think Asians in general are underrepresented in the media, in movies, TV shows, books, magazines. And in addition to Asians being underrepresented, our Daga people are not represented at all, unless you count Miss Vietnam in the Universe pageant, which was mind blowing because that's never happened before. And that's why it was such a big deal. But us being so underrepresented almost makes our people and our history invisible. So this is one way that Montagnard and Montagnard American stories will keep our history and our people alive. So, I don't want people out there to think like, oh, Idan already wrote a book and my mom already wrote a book, so no one's going to want to read my story, because that's not true at all. And I want you, to actually think, for example, how many white American or the traditional, American life middle class stories are published every year, thousands of them. And no one thinks, oh, there's already this American middle class story about a wife and a mother, and I'm not going to write that. So that thought doesn't cross their mind, and it shouldn't be a factor in whether or not we publish. Another thing is our children need these stories. They need to see themselves represented. And right now, that's also severely lacking. I do have this book, so this is great for anyone who's looking for a Montagnard children's book. But me being a mom, I was looking for something like that, and I was like, this is not right. This should not be the only option that my child has if they want to see and read a Montagnard story. So that's one thing that I encourage everyone to think about if they are Montagnard and they're an aspiring writer, and not just Montagnards. I mean, immigrant stories are missing, Asian stories in general, women authors. So definitely, we need more of all of that. And one thing that really stood out to me and that I really loved about the writing workshop, Apocalypse Never, is I didn't even realize the need I had to read other stories that were so similar to mine and that I could relate to. But at the same time, there were so many differences as well. But it's almost enlightening, to read stories, whether it's, something big such as, war trauma that we can all relate to, but something as little as, hey, everyone knows what, yam throng is. Like, you don't even have to explain that. Or when you mention Eagle brand green oil, again, this is something that's big in our culture and we know what that is. So this is definitely a need for our community, but some of our history is also part of the US and American history. So this is something that would benefit everyone.
I agree with everyone, and everyone had such thoughtful things to say. Um, one of the participants in the workshop Apocalypse Never is Abby. I'm not too sure if she's on or not, but she talked about how, or she actually is working on a YA piece, and it's about a mother and daughter who go to the mall in like North Carolina, and it's a wonderful piece for its kind of um, relatability and its ordinariness, and just the fact that like it's a story that our generation, like the 1.5 or the second generation, can relate to, and of course it's powerful because Abby is also incorporating Montagnard history into that, but very subtly. So it's very artfully done. I mean, everyone in the workshop are, they're doing similarly amazing and inspiring work. And I can't even begin to really put into words how powerful the experience has been for me. I feel like I'm probably learning and getting as much out of leading the Apocalypse Never workshop as all of you. If not, I feel like I might be getting more out of it. And let me see. Yeah. I mean, I'll just say briefly, like, I did not grow up in Greensboro. I did not grow up in North Carolina. Um, so I am very much outside of the kind of North Carolina experience and like the refugee community. So I'm learning so much myself. Um, and we are at 6:15. So now we are opening up the Q&A. I know that there actually already are some questions in here. So
yeah, Rena, I can see a couple of questions, and if the audience can also remind me and help me out. I see that Melissa Malo has a question, and I'll put it out to her. Maybe can you put your video on and your audio on and maybe ask the question? We'll see if we can get an answer to Melissa.
Hi, I'm actually walking, so hopefully it's not too loud, but I'm actually asking on behalf of my sister Abby, who I think is watching on Facebook Live, and she asked, sorry, I missed today, Bob. Iran, about if you are writing another novel or thinking about publishing another novel.
Yeah, so I actually started rewriting in undergrad and continued writing a little bit in my master's program, rewriting some stories that I had written from Homeland and writing new pieces, again, more centered on the historical aspect of things, so that I wouldn't, misconstrue anything as I was telling the story. But I did kind of hit a wall once I finished, all these workshops since the 6th grade, all the way up until finishing my master's in 2017. So once I got into the workforce, it was definitely the very famed post MFA wilderness of being very difficult to sit down and write again, especially going into a publishing industry where I would read a lot and have to edit. So the last thing I would want to do is come home and look at a Word document and try to write my own things.
Right,
but
you're an editor of Forbes, right?
Yeah, I work at Advantage Forbes Books, so that's I used to edit there. Now I do project management there, and then hopefully I'll get back into the editorial side of things. But I think out of all of this, I really appreciate this entire opportunity to talk about craft, talk about writing, because it actually has definitely sparked a bit of a that passion that kind of faded a little bit after MFA, because again, it's hard to write and keep schedules for yourself when you don't have an instructor just whipping you the entire time, telling you your story's due in 2 weeks, you got to get this done. So being in control of your own writing and setting your own deadlines is a lot more difficult than having someone do it for you. But again, I think this opportunity has presented a really great thing for myself in terms of trying to publish that other novel, because as I told my dad, one of my regrets was not speaking to my granduncle enough about capturing his stories of in the war and everything that he did, and I don't want to that to happen to my dad too. So it's definitely like paramount to me to at least make sure I get everything I can down, even if it's just enough for something like a memoir. But it's something I've been working on for a long time. I hope to make it happen soon.
We have a question from Sarah Colm. Sarah, if you want to go ahead and ask your question, please.
Yeah, it was just when you were talking about the writing prompts, I missed it. You had one regarding Gerald Hickey, did you?
Mm-hmm.
Could you repeat it?
Yeah, I mean, the writing prompt is a little involved, but essentially he talks about a moment in history where all these tribes came together. And so the full row were presenting demands, and then tribes who were not, or like other Montagnards who were not actually part of full row, were also presenting demands. Those demands were a few things. One of them was land, um, well, land claims because Montagnard land was being taken away by the Vietnamese. And the other one was the right to continue teaching Highlander languages in schools, in the regional schools. So I asked the students to write about a child or well, try to start drawing a character based on people that they knew and then extrapolate some of those details and place a character in 1958 and essentially that character is somehow directly or indirectly experiencing and witnessing this moment where these people are making these demands, these political demands. And another part of that is the fact that something that they want is being prevented by this political situation. So it's like, and it could be a mundane, ordinary thing that they want. They want to play a game, they want to do this, they want to eat a certain thing, whatever it is, but that is somehow prevented from these issues of either land or language. So it's a writing constraint that really forces the participants to be very creative in creating a character and writing a first-person narrative.
We've got
That's terrific. Did you have many takers for that particular prompt?
We'll see on Wednesday.
Okay. Thanks.
Get your writing in, everyone.
We have a question from Darian. It's a friendly question. It's coming from I assume Dan's brother, but it says, Darian, are you there? Do you want to ask the question?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead.
Okay, sure. I guess this is a little bit more personal, but I guess maybe with Anna first, and then Danair. I guess what were your favorite stories from your parents that you, I guess, had the most impact on you in your writing, and I guess just favorite stories in general.
Are you asking from her book or just stories in general that she would tell us?
Just stories in general, just things that kind of inspired you to start writing, and grow your skill set there.
So my mom used to actually tell us a few Montagnard myths. I don't think any of them made it to her book, but to me, those were always the most interesting growing up. And there needs to be, these detailed myths need to be written down and published because they're not like anything I've ever heard of before. I mean, maybe in other Asian cultures, but just, things, and I don't know if your parents told you guys any of these stories, but things such as, I shared this one with the class, for example, how in the forest and in the jungle, they would believe that there were evil spirits. And because of that, you never said a child's real name for fear that the evil spirit could, influence that child or take over that child or, call that child by their real name and lure them away. And because of that, you actually gave your child a nickname. And usually these nicknames were not complimentary nicknames. They usually made fun of like, an embarrassing, body part, or one that I say that's very common, for example, is the nickname Ju, which in our language means like, dark. I mean, I don't want to say ugly, but kind of, I mean, it's not really a nice term, but so many kids have this nickname. And this is why another reason, for example, if let's say someone's on the chubby side, that's going to be their nickname. So like in the US, this would be like really cruel and just very mean, but it's very, very common in Montagnard culture to give your children these unflattering nicknames. And my mom said that's where it stems from. So that's an example of like one of the stories she would tell, or like, she would tell about the tigers in the jungle, how they were almost godlike and they had a purpose. And, before they killed anyone, they would actually like stomp their feet a certain number of times. And it was kind of asking like permission from the earth. I mean, just so many Montagnard myths. And maybe one day I'll be able to get her to write all of them down, because they're really amazing. And it also is very insightful with Montagnard culture, because even in the workshop, no one else knew that myth about the evil spirits in the forest. And they were like, that's why we have all these mean nicknames. So yeah.
That question also is to you, Edan, from your brother.
Yeah. Actually, one of my favorite stories from my parents happened kind of recently, which doesn't actually take into account my dad's, well, it takes into account his childhood, but it's also relevant in present day, which was relevant to his, escaping Vietnam in 1975. He had a friend there, Tate, and they were really, really close high school friends. My dad was the only Montagnard,
Saigon, yeah, the whole school.
yeah, in the whole school in Saigon, and I forgot the name of the school, but they were best friends. They would study together. They would go to each other's houses. They would do martial arts together. And when he had to flee, he left without saying goodbye, and they lost all contact for 45 years or so. And obviously, after that amount of time, there was just no hope, really. They didn't think each other was alive. And you got to correct me here, because I think he was watching, was it YouTube?
Somebody posted on YouTube about that high school reunion somewhere in California, and he saw that he wrote comment that, and he was in the prison after the war for 9 years, and he escaped, and then he wrote story. I have one of my closest friend, and he mentioned my name on it, and so he's the only one, the Highlander in my whole school, and he asked anybody that know about him, please email. And then my older brother in Vietnam saw the YouTube, so he posted. So I saw the text, so I wrote an email, and then they started get in touch, connect. And he was, when he received my email, he didn't sleep the whole night until 3 days later on. He drove, and he and his wife from Ohio to Kendall, Charleston to see me.
Yeah, and we have really nice pictures. We recreated some pictures they had from 1973 or so.
Yeah.
I don't know if we have it in the room. I don't think so, but yeah, that was just one of the more powerful stories to me, because also it made the gravity of the situation of what happened a lot more real to me. Being able to see someone who knew my dad when he was, around my age, when I even before or after I wrote the book. So just being able to talk to him and realizing my dad is still the same jokester he was when he was in high school, it was really real to me, and it was really touching in a way to see them kind of catch up like nothing had ever happened, although quite a lot had happened since then.
On that note, my name is Andrew, by the way. I haven't properly introduced myself. I'm mostly a technical assistant here today. I'm going to wrap up a part of this, but then Rena, I'm throwing it back to you, because you've done this fantastic job today with these amazing authors. I'll leave it to you for all those magnificent words of thanks. You can reach Rena with more questions and comments on her website, which I think is posted in chat. Stay tuned for our next event in the series, The Past is Present, New Montagnard Artists, which will take place on May 21, and it's entitled Voices of the Highlands. You can find the latest information on our Facebook page, The Past is Present, which I think is also in chat as well. I'm just blown away by today. I want to thank everybody, but I want to turn this over back to Rena, who's got the last word on all of this. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Andrew. And thank you, Liana and Fun and everyone who's been supporting this event kind of behind the scenes. in closing, I want to thank everyone for supporting Indigenous Montagnard stories and for joining us in celebrating Idan and Yon's amazing accomplishments in publishing 2 powerful and vital narratives. As the first 2 books published on the Montagnard war and refugee experience, I have a feeling that these 2 books will continue to serve and inspire us and future generations. So I feel super honored to be a part of this in celebrating all of that, as I am sure the audience does as well. Please join me in applauding our phenomenal guests and thanking them for being a part of this groundbreaking event. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
I like to clap.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.